Well, good morning. Welcome. We are going to get started. Welcome on behalf of Women in Cleantech and Sustainability to Embracing Your Power for Good. I am Trish Pinella. I'm board member and the marketing chair of WCS. Let's see, maybe move to the next slide. Here's our agenda. We're going to start with intros and some housekeeping, move into our panel discussion, and then we're going to have some breakout rooms and a wrap up. We all know Zoom etiquette. Let's keep ourselves on mute until the breakouts. Share your video, and if you'd like, drop your LinkedIn profile into the chat. And next slide. And if you are not a member today, we welcome you to join us. If you join by tomorrow, your cost of today's ticket will be reimbursed, and we currently have a 20% discount in December on membership. And corporate members, thank you to TerraSmart for sponsoring our event today. If you or your company are interested in corporate membership, please reach out. There are many benefits. We also have a discount on corporate membership this month of 50%, which is unprecedented. So hopefully you and your companies can take advantage of that. And you don't have to be a corporate sponsor to sponsor an event. So that's also a way to support WCS and amplify your brand and showcase your dedication to women in clean tech. And let's see, today's speakers, we're very lucky to have them. We're going to start with Casey Rose, VP of HR at TerraSmart, who has 18 years of leadership experience supporting pharma, CPG, aerospace and defense, and renewable energy. And her focus is on people, their talents, and their passions. We have Naveed Hassan, VP of Strategy at SunGrow North America, who is a strategic visionary. His experience in marketing strategies positions organizations as leaders in the global sustainability movement, and he's a champion of allyship and inclusion. And then we have Chris Nichols, Executive Director of Renewables Forward. She served as, with 40 years of experience, in clean energy and advancing equity initiatives. She has served as Green Jobs Advisor on the Department of Labor, and then joined the Department of Energy, where she created Solar Ready Vets, and also served as the DOE's Workforce Director. We are thrilled to have these three panelists. Thank you for joining us today. This will be an actionable session. So at the end, Chris will share a question that we will talk about in breakouts of 5 people. You'll also receive resources from Chris after this to keep our work going. So let's get started. Casey, why is it important to identify and use our superpowers in our workspaces?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I love this. First of all, I love that it's called superpowers, because that's really what it is at the end of the day. Every single person, no matter who you are, what you do, what company you work for, whatever it might be, everybody brings something pretty darn cool to, their relationships, their businesses. And that's what all this is about today, right? So how do we focus on our personal strengths, our personal powers is what we're kind of calling it, to create those environments where we work that really brings everyone to bring their best self to their workplace. And so when we think about how do we use these powers, ultimately it's really for us to just create inclusive spaces for everyone to bring their best ideas. Everyone comes from different backgrounds, different experiences, and ultimately is going to lead all of us to having, better high-performing teams and for our businesses.
Yes. So what practical steps can leaders take to model curiosity, collaboration, and inclusion in high-pressure, innovation-driven industries like clean tech?
Yeah, absolutely. So I came up with a couple different areas, and there's tons of ideas around this, right? So I tried to boil it down to kind of 10 key things is what I kind of think of from an HR perspective of how do you bring your strengths, how do you bring these powers to your everyday business? So I'll kind of go through these as, as quick as possible. The first one, though, whether you're a leader in your organization, whether you're an individual contributor, whatever it might be, first and foremost is lead by example. We've been taught this since we were kids, right? And it's really at the end of the day for anybody, this is how you create change in your workspace. So by leading by example, that's be conscious of your words, your behaviors, your interactions with others. That can help drive diverse perspectives in everything that we do. Same with share your story. So, if you're a really vulnerable leader and you're going through a tough time or you're dealing with something, let's say in your home life, that is going to leave an impact on folks. And those folks will then use that same sharing of stories to lead by example for inclusivity. The second one is really all things kind of emotional intelligence. Without getting into the whole science behind what is EQ, this is really just how empathetic are you towards people in your work environment? So are you attuned to others' emotions, the needs that they may have? Are we looking at the perspectives that they bring to, fostering whatever that key inclusive environment is? So the more that we can develop our strong empathetic selves, that allows for understanding. People can hopefully drop their barriers around others and participate in kind of the normal work environment. The third one is really, okay, how do we amplify those that are underrepresented in kind of the day-to-day? So we really have to do that by creating space. So if you never give folks an opportunity to speak up, first and foremost, we have to. There are a lot of folks that are not, super outgoing. They don't want to be, at the front of the class type of approach. And so we have to stop as leaders and create that opportunity and just be quiet, honestly, sometimes, to allow others to speak up so that they have that opportunity. And the other one with kind of the amplifying our voices is help those folks find a mentor, right? A lot of times folks don't want to speak in front of a whole group. That can be scary, totally okay. But that said, if someone has a mentor that they can speak to one-on-one, bounce ideas off of, get some career advice, that's how their voice can be heard. So the fourth one is really around how do we encourage those diverse perspectives specific to decision making? I'm sure everyone has heard, the more diverse and inclusive that you have for your teams, the higher profitability your company has, but it really comes down to that decision making piece. So you have to do that by having diverse and inclusive teams. And that is everything from backgrounds, experiences, different skill sets. It's all of that put together. So as a leader, you have to look at the skills you have, the backgrounds of folks you have, and experiences of those on your teams to really drive different ways of decision making across the board. And I would say also with decision making, you have to be open to a growth mindset. Be open to someone else's diverse perspective that's going to be very different than yourself. And that just might change the way that you look at decisions and the things that you need to do for your team. The next one is really around how do we drive change organizationally? And, as someone who sits in HR, we do a lot of this with, our policies, our practices. A big one is around pay equity, right? So if you want to drive change, you have to look at your practices within your organization. That includes like anti-bias training. The pay one comes up a lot, at least in my area of work, just because that is, especially for women, it's a hot topic. But that's where we can drive that change to promote, using who we are, our strengths to get what we need for ourselves. Promoting innovation through inclusion, how do you do this, right? Again, going back to you have to create that safe space. So if we aren't creating this environment where folks feel like they can take a risk, right? And if, let's say they fail, that's okay. So we've got to create those spaces because ultimately at the end of the day, for us to be innovative in any company, right? Really doesn't matter, honestly, what industry, but for any company, for innovation, you have to be able to take risks. And, for all of us, we have to create that space so that's okay to happen. So then when we think about how do you cultivate resilience, right, through your networks, there are people that love networking, and then there's others that hate networking, and so it's one of those, when we think about how do we build relationships, that's networking at the end of the day, right? So, I would encourage everyone, take the time within your network, out of your network. They don't have to be business related, individuals. How do you build relationships so that you are looking at diverse insights different strategies to overcome challenges maybe your business is, facing at that moment. That's where you can tap into your network and see what others are doing. And then ultimately, you got to adapt to it, right? So, if there are things changing in the market, renewable energy is a little bit of a roller coaster, right? So, all of us have to adapt to what is going on in the market at any given time. And the more diverse our teams are, frankly, the better we'll be able to adapt to that based on different people's experiences. And coming from an HR side, renewable energy and others, we always have to figure out how do we sell to the business why we focus on inclusion. So it's selling that business case of why this stuff is important. And there's a lot of research around this, but it's really showing that organizations with those diverse teams are more innovative and are more financially stable, right? But you got to back that up. It's a lot of times folks will just say, they'll be like, that sounds great, Casey. But you got to find the research to back it up in any of your initiatives that you want to drive within your teams, anything you want to sell to the company, invest in more training, for instance. That costs money. So showing the business why that stuff is important is going to go a long way to really pushing people in their strengths. And kind of with that one, we always want to keep learning, right? And so I know this stuff takes time out of our days, but really taking part in different workshops, different trainings that you can attend, anything kind of in that DEI space is only going to help you and your teams moving forward. So whether that's in-house training or let's say that you're part of, again, a network or even, an event like this is learning. So encourage everybody to continue focusing on this continuous learning in the DEI and inclusion space. That's going to help bring your personal powers out. And then kind of the last one that I've got is really just everything kind of around accountability. And so if you are bringing your best self to work, if you are bringing your strengths to work, how do you hold yourself accountable to, fostering inclusion? How do you hold yourself accountable to being your best kind of every single day? And don't get me wrong, we all have bad days, right? We've all been there. But ultimately, how do we set ourselves up for success? And really that is through accountability for ourselves and for others. So just kind of 10 areas where I'd say to help focus, to really bring ways to bring the best self for you and your teams to be more inclusive.
I love those. Thank you, Casey. I wrote down notes because, that's what we're here to do, continuous learning, but leading by example, and finding a mentor or being a mentor is key. We have our mentorship program coming up with WCS in January, and we always have more mentees than mentors. So if anyone out there is looking to be a mentor, I think that we could still accept your application so that we don't have to let down too many people that are looking. And then, yeah, continuous learning. Let's continue to work on our superpowers and maybe find new ones because, yeah, I love networking. Not everybody does, but it's like a muscle and you can build it. All right, so we're gonna move to a question for Naveed. He's not feeling 100% today, so we're gonna take it easy on him. Thank you for being here, Naveed. But I feel like you have so much value to offer as an ally. And so I want you to tell me about a little window into the importance of allyship for you and maybe your earliest memory or most prominent memory of when you realized the importance of it and what the outcome was.
Sure. Yeah, I have to say my the term ally is sort of really new to me, but I've really realized being an ally has been something that has been ingrained in me from my upbringing. I have a kind of a different situation, very unique background where that my grandfather founded actually one of the world's largest non-governmental organization called BRAC, which was focused on the development of worldwide, in the developing world, especially in the global south. And the primary mission behind this organization was the empowerment of women, but the emphasis was always on the empowerment of women is equally beneficial to men as it is women. So it always has been ingrained in me that, just because, that being an ally needs to be the default. It's not something that a term that's, it's something now when I hear it, it almost sounds like it's an award, but for me growing up, it sounds like that needs to be the default for most people, because the opposite of ally is what? It's an adversary or it's an opponent, which I think today, when we're developing modern workforce, is not something that should be necessarily acceptable from my perspective. And then the secondly, I would say observing my father. He was a person of color and an immigrant to this country, but he was quite successful in the banking world, the finance world, and he would always tell me about being the only person of color in a room filled of Caucasian men, pretty much 90% of his career. And he would talk about instances of blatant discrimination or blatant racism that would occur even at a sea level context, which he just almost had to just laugh off in person. And to me, that would always anger me. Said, why didn't you say something? Why didn't you do something? And now looking back on it, I realized that he was doing something when he was building his teams. He would build diverse teams of people from all different backgrounds, of women, and now looking back on it, I realized that's the way that he was really being the ally and really combating, the systemic issues that were causing the barriers for him in the workplace, but without putting a name to it, but putting a program attached to it. But now when I'm, just looking at the last previous slide, it's so important really to identify those pain points, those gaps in organization, and address them one by one, because it doesn't resonate, I would say, for the majority of people who are in a position of power today in a corporate setting, unless it doesn't will not resonate with someone unless they actually go through it themselves or experience them themselves. And I think as soon as I enter the workforce, I could see as a person of color what it's like, that it is a real thing. There are real barrier to entries, and then we do need allies for all types of protective classes in order to combat this and create a more equitable workforce and for the overall development of society.
Yeah, and in meeting you, I remember you saying earlier in your career you had a lot of female management, and you kind of witnessed that same unique vibe that you were
Absolutely.
describing.
Absolutely. I mean, I would say, and when I first started in the renewable sector, about almost 13 years ago, I remember became so apparent the gender imbalance in the industry, and then the fact that how underrepresented women were in executive position, or just generally speaking in the industry as a whole. And almost it became sort of, I had one instance of one female manager requesting me to find a vendor for, back then what they would call those booth babes or whatever that term was, for the trade shows, and when it was such a rampant practice that was going on. So it was almost, very concerning to me to see that if it's such, these sexist practice were just so accepted that even, a female leader, someone in power, had to almost accept them because that just was the standard. And then, that's someone who I still speak to today. And I know, of course, she's sort of become someone who's, dedicated her career to combat these these sort of practices in the industry as it's evolved. But it's gone a long way. But just noticing the female leaders that I've had to work with, it's just, I think we have a long way to go still in the industry. That's for sure. Because if you just go to any trade show or go to any industry event, you don't see much, even just gender diversity, yet not to speak of racial or other type of protected classes that are represented in a way that's representative of the country.
Yeah, we saw that at RE Plus this year, and we did a panel discussion on male allyship, and we're going to continue that conversation into 2025 with WCS at in-person events and at a virtual event. So also, Naveed, maybe share an example of how fostering an inclusive environment has led to innovation or breakthroughs in clean tech and sustainability.
Okay, so I have one example for sustainability and one example for clean tech. For sustainability, I would say, I think many of you are familiar with the concept of microcredit lending that has been been a phenomenon in the global South, where basically their small loans are given by NGOs to impoverished families in order to start a small business, and to which basically is like the first step to lift someone out of poverty. So when these programs first started, it was all inclusive. So anyone, pretty much male, female, anyone could apply to them, right? And after a while, they would notice there started to be a trend of people defaulting on loans, and they came under a lot of criticism that, is it more exploitation, or is it or are they really, is it a really ineffective practice? So of course they did look at data to see what the differentiator between a successful loan recipient was and a non-successful one, and it was data overwhelmingly point to the fact that women were the best, were the ones that were paying the loans back on time, were creating the most profitable businesses. So in a way, I guess this is kind of not inclusivity, but the fact that is women focused and women forward, where it's showing that it's a perfect case study to show that giving women a position of authority and decision-making position when it comes to a business, running a business, yields commercial results. And we've seen many studies where that's just proven by data. So I think after these microcredit programs became exclusive only to women recipients, it showed the success level had dramatically increased after that. So that's one example of thing of sustainability where it kind of the mindset changed into where how forming this program would through an empowerment lens would actually create a successful business model for these not-for-profit banks. And the Cleantech side, I have to say the first thing that comes to my mind are the women leaders that have shaped the industry in the last several years. One of them in particular, I'd say, head of our our largest trade groups, SIA, Abby Hopper, and the accomplishments that have happened in the last few years, especially under the Inflation Reduction Act and solar being at the forefront of this milestone bill, I would have to say was a pivotal moment in the industry. And this is under trade organization that's a woman-led trade organization. I have to say that's the first thing that comes to my mind is when the results that happen when you create an inclusive environment, when you put women in a position of authority and power at the top. And I would say one of my biggest mentors also is Christian Kirsch, who's the vice president of marketing at Nextracker. She's the pioneer of marketing in this industry, especially when it comes to manufacturing side of the industry. And it's been inspirational to see these women in particular just drive the innovative and entrepreneurial spirit of this exciting sector that we're in.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Abby. She was one of the many people who recommended Chris Nichols for this panel. And, I follow her on LinkedIn. If you don't, I highly recommend you do. She is a real person and she shares her life and the hard work that she does in a way that I think makes us all realize that we need more women in these positions of leadership. Thank you, Naveed. I know that you're not feeling great, so if you have to drop, I understand, but thank you. And then Chris Nichols, excited to hear from you because I know this is your life's work. And so what can we do as individuals to change the dynamic around power in our companies? I think that's what we all want to hear from you.
Fantastic. And thank you, Trish, so much. And Casey and Naveed, my fellow panelists, so much wisdom in the room, the Zoom room right now. So I want to give all of us in the webinar permission to feel to feel your own wisdom, your own experience. It doesn't matter how old you are, how long you've been in the industry, how long you've been in a professional capacity. You bring life experience and wisdom to this group, and I encourage us all to share whatever we have. So if you could go back to the previous slide, please. I'll kick us off. So I just want to say the latest US presidential election general election cycle could have discouraged many women and has discouraged many women, given the seeming messages we receive from the general population about our rights over our own bodies, our rights to corporate and business place. I'm here to say you have control, and you can assert that and create a space for yourself, your colleagues, your family that is positive and hopeful. I am a very hopeful person, and Women in Cleantech and Sustainability is a hopeful organization to share that power with. How can you feel your own power? I want to give you, there's a message in the chat about facts. So I want to emphasize a few things that Naveed and Casey shared. Women who diversify boards of directors I have mostly US statistics, so I'll share those. Women, even one woman on a board of director has shown in data, any company, not just clean tech companies, but any company that has at least one woman on the board of director has twice the resilience of competitors with no women on the board. Women in leadership have 6 times the resilience in their companies compared to non-women in leadership in competitor organizations. Profitability among peer organizations, if you have any women in the C-suite, your company is 3 times more likely to show at least a double-digit profitability over peer companies with no women in the C-suites. And these are recent studies from a host of companies, KPMG, McKinsey, BCG. I'm citing recent studies. So women bring diversity. Renewables Forward, my organization, is a nonprofit. We emphasize taking action for women and people of color in all the clean energy industries, taking action to bring that inclusion into our workforces. So when we feel overwhelmed, I think about what can I do today in my circle of authority? And that's what I'd like to share on the webinar today. And believe me, it's a lot of fun. You can do it every second. You can do it across the year. And I'm going to share some tips, tools, free resources, and a little exercise at the end. Next slide, please. So you can control you. Pretty much all humans only have control of themselves. You know this if you have toddlers. You know this if you have aging parents or elders or even animals that you're taking care of. You can't control other people or situations, but you can control yourself. And I've shown some pictures of women who controlled their environments. They had lots of challenges. I said, what can I do in my space? Mary Jackson, she was actually featured in the film, one of the first human computers at NASA. She controlled her space. She actually developed Fortran. She hired other African-American women to be human computers before computers existed. This is a picture of her in 1953, managing NASA as an engineer in the wind tunnel research. The picture to the right are actual women I run with every, a couple times a week. They're not all CEOs. One of them is actually a police captain and I won't tell you which one, but all of us band together to exercise. We don't run fast. We talk about things, but we keep each other alive socially and in our spheres of influence. I mean, it's you go girl, come out here and exercise, take that piece of control back for your life. Even if everything else is going bluey, you can exercise. Click, please.
It reminds me of the Solar Sisters that Abby has.
That's exactly right. And
I love that.
I want to say Abby Hopper is a member of Renewables Forward with SIA, as is Kristen Kirsch, who Naveed mentioned, both of those women leaders. They are fabulous leaders, and they practice what I'm going to share with you every single day. So what can we control? We control our time. The most precious, valuable commodity any human has is time. You control your time. You control your reactions to whatever's hitting you in your workplace. Is this something offensive? Is it something surprising? Do you feel supported? Do you feel gaslit? What do you feel? You control how you feel, and you control what you say and what you do in reaction to that situation. You control your decisions. Like the women pictured, they made decisions, they made choices. Okay, these are my limitations, these are my constraints, these are my strengths. What am I going to do now in this situation with this information? And you control your space. And by that, I mean your physical space. And so looking at me right now, I'm going to share a tip. You're in your little Zoom room. You need 2 fingers of height above the top of your head and the top of your Zoom screen. You want to fill your screen. You want some kind of company logo behind you if you can, or at least blur the background so you're not showing, your laundry room or your closet or wherever we've been stuck during COVID, and maybe you still are. And you want to dress appropriately for the situation. And hopefully, if you're in a corporate situation or a company situation, you want to dress a title above where the rest of the room is, or where your title is right now. Because it sends a message. This look sends a message. I control my space. I control my presence. And I have a few other tips to go, and I want to share those in a minute. Next slide, please. So it's important that we know who has power right now. On the left, we see what the culture would like us to believe is all boards of directors. And many of our boards of directors do reflect diversity. But as Naveed said, clean energy industry often is not quite as diverse as they want to be, which is why Renewables Forward exists, to help them get more diverse and to bring competent women and people of color into the boardrooms. The actual boards look more like the group on the right still in most of America. Women on boards are still less than 3% of the Fortune 500. Any women in any board of a Fortune 500 is less than 3%. Women writ large in any capacity in the clean energy industry, still about 21-22% of our total workforces, all women. And some of those industries like hydropower are even smaller numbers. Solar is doing roughly the best as an industry in having women in the workplace. That doesn't mean solar has women on all its boards of directors, or wind, or batteries, storage, or efficiency, or any of those organizations. The boards of directors are not looking good, but give me a click. Our boards could look like this. Now, the picture on the left is actually a Women in Cleantech and Sustainability group. And this is a mentorship group. And you have mentorship so you can grow into positions of responsibility. Next clip, please. So we all have some power. And the key is, what power do I have? What power should I have? Can I build in my situation right now? Next slide, please. So these are just 2 systems of claiming power that you have right now, no matter where you are in the organization, no matter what your style is. If you're an extrovert, an introvert, a driver, a social person, no matter where you are, you can exert some power if you know yourself. And Casey was particularly good. And Casey, I want to thank you for all the tips you gave. Knowing yourself and playing to your strengths is where you got to start. So physically, strong usually means physical, but not all of us have great physical capacity. For instance, I seem like a giant person. I am 5'4". And many women are not able. Now, and people are not able. We have differently abled populations who are great in the workplace, by the way, but maybe face barriers because of perceptions of their ability. So overcoming that is important, especially in a remote work environment. So if you're feeling like your space is being cramped online, that's below, but in person, like your supervisor or another colleague comes up and leans over you. Men are really bad at this. They're not thinking about it. They're unconscious, but they're taller sometimes. And so they lean over women in the workplace. The first thing you do is stand up. just stand up and look them in the eye and continue the conversation. You don't have to do anything else. If you are seated, for instance, in a group situation, in a boardroom or a meeting room, lean in. Put your both hands calmly on the desk surface, the table surface, and lean in. And still look people directly in the eye. Always use direct eye contact if you can, unless you're reading from something. And then when you're done reading, look up. And I mean, take all of your space, which means your chair, your Zoom screen, your cube, your office is your space. Occupy it. And that doesn't mean like, you know, asserting yourself that way, but don't let people move too close. And in fact, you can say, you know what, you're standing too close. Could you back up? Or, I need more space. Or, could you sit there for me while we have this meeting? You don't need to apologize. And the last thing, physically, give me another click on the screen, please. You're going to laugh. So in 2012, there was a TED Talk by a researcher, Amy Cuddy. And her findings, she's a psychologist, her findings were that, particularly for women, if before you entered a stressful situation or a situation where you needed to negotiate, you took space, this is on your own, you took space, you stepped into your office, closed the door, or the hallway, or even a bathroom, and you literally adopted the Wonder Woman stance. Your fists are closed, they're on your hips. I invite you to try it now, if you're able to stand. And you stand there and you square off. Your feet are a little wider than shoulder width apart. Your hands are on your hips, your shoulders are back, and you're just breathing. Now you can laugh and say, how dumb is this? And I feel like an idiot. But remember, you're not doing this in front of anybody, A. And B, it really works.
I like
Breathe.
it.
Just breathe and stand like that for like 60 to 90 seconds, 2 minutes. And that rewires your brain to be more powerful and less stressed. You don't have to do anything else. You don't have to chant a mantra. Just change how you're standing before you enter a difficult conversation. Now, if you're on Zoom, I already said, fill the screen, dress above your title, 2 fingers above your head, fill the screen, have your background, all that stuff. The best thing you can also do, though, if you are presenting, is prepare yourself to present. Give it your all. Have your notes. Be ready. Be ready to put the stuff in the chat by having a little document on the side in a Word document where you've pre-typed chat stuff and you can copy, paste, boom, at the right moment. So you don't have to like look over here and type. You're ready. And you look like, oh man, she owns the room. Next slide, please. So I'm just briefly, and I'm going to double check. These slides are going to all the participants after the call. Is that correct? Okay. So you don't have to study this in great depth. You're going to get this slide after the call. I'm going to focus on one interactive task today, and that is to think of yourself as somebody who can be, for women in clean tech and sustainability, a mentor. You can be a mentee, or you can simply be an ally. Now, what's the difference between a mentor, mentee, and an ally? An ally is cross-purpose. A mentor advises, a mentee receives and responds. An ally has your back in group situations as a trusted confidant. An ally gives you honest advice. An ally can recommend good things for you. An ally is trusted to give you good feedback in terms of criticism. Hey man, hey gal, not cool. That was a bad look. Why don't you try this instead? And you can trust that person not to share it. Allies are discreet. And so I'm trying to say, we all need allies. Those women you saw in that picture, we run together, those are my allies. I have lots of allies, people I trust. I can text, I can call, I can take walks, have coffees We all need allies, especially in the workplace. So you want to find your allies. You also want to be an ally, because the good things, like a ripple in a pond, if you're a person who is trustworthy and honest, no matter how powerful you are or how powerful you think you are, you give off the vibe of, I will be your ally. And the more allies you have and the more allies you gives you additional power for good, to create inclusion, to amplify others' voices. All the tips Casey provided, all the advice Naveed provided, it's all right. It's true. They're smart people, and you're also a smart person. So let's move into an exercise where you can talk to each other and think about this and share in a small group. Next slide, please. We're going to break into small groups, 5 people to a group. I want you to share in your small group what strengths of your own you can offer to your workplace colleagues or people in adjacent spaces as a workplace ally. What do you radiate that makes you a great ally? And when we come back to the large group, we'll just type a little bit of what we thought of, what we were able to brainstorm with our small group into the chat. So you can send us into small groups now. And this is going to be part of what you do.
If some of you want to share in the chat what you talked about, what your strengths are, or what strength you appreciate that someone else shared that you want to build on or work on, that would be amazing. We have so many great resources from Chris that will be shared after this presentation. I clicked through on some of these in the last few days, and they really do give you tools to continue this work, which is important. It's going to continue to be important over the next few years. Wellness at work, being inclusive, and your culture, speaking up. All of these topics are important. Move to the next slide.
I wanted to share, Trish, that this resource from Renewables Forward provides all these tips and more, and anyone on the call today and with Women in Cleantech and Sustainability is free to use these resources in the pathway forward. Renewables Forward has created this as a tool to advance action for inclusion, diversity, and equity across our clean energy space. And I wanted to put this out there. In addition to the tools on the previous slide, those are all free resources, many of which are from Women in Cleantech and Sustainability, but not all. Other sources that give great resources for these participants on this webinar. And I really want people to feel free to use them and to jump into them.
Thank you for doing this. This is amazing.
And you can go on to the next slide. We're fine.
And there's Chris's email, chris.nichols@renewablesforward.org, if you have any questions for her. And next slide. And Casey shared this, and I have a soft spot for Grogu, so we included this one. Your path you must decide. And, you know, I feel like that's fitting for this topic and for embracing your power. Next slide. So Women in Cleantech has a merch store. If you want to, oh, you can't see it, my coffee cup here. If you want something from the merch store, we have a 15% off discount. Next slide. And thank you to our volunteers and speakers today. Denise is our event volunteer coordinator with WCS and does an amazing job. Marika is our marketing coordinator and just does all of our social media and so much of our hard work. We have Julie Bush on the call today, who just moved from a board secretary to volunteer committee lead. And we have a new volunteer on this event, Fatima, and thank you for supporting our event today. Next slide. We accept any feedback you have. future topics that you want to hear about, we'd love to hear that. We're building out our schedule for 2025, also for in-person events. If you're attending a conference and you'd like to put together a networking event, reach out because we can support that. And next slide. And be sure and follow us on social media to hear about what we're doing and all of our great events. We're going to start sharing some great member spotlights coming up in the next year, so you can learn about some of our members and board members and volunteers and get to know each other, and encourage you to get involved. Join our monthly member networking. So much value comes from that. We have one, I think it's December 13th. They're typically on Fridays. And I've attended several and I've met so many of you, and it's been fabulous. We thank you for sharing this hour today. If you have any questions, reach out to us, and have a wonderful, empowering day.